Okay, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay.
Your mic's on, Councillor Downer.
Yep, thank you.
Madam Clerk, are you ready to go?
Yes, Your Worship, I believe we are good to go now.
Thank you. Well, Council, it seems we have quorum and it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call this
It's not
January 20th regular meeting of Midland Town Council to order. It's, as I said, 7 p.m. And I will ask if, well, actually, I think what I'll do first is the land acknowledgement. The town of Midland recognizes that it is located on land which is the traditional and treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people, now known as the Chippewa Tri-Council, comprised of Bosley First Nation, Rama First Nation, and the Georgina Island First Nation. This territory is within the Pre-Confederation Treaty 5 and Treaty 16, and included within the Williams Treaties of 1923. The town of Midland recognizes that it is located on land which is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the historic homelands of the Métis, and that our town is home to a large and diverse community of Indigenous peoples. Now, for those of us joining this evening, you can watch on Channel 53 Rogers, or I believe Rogers is also streaming the meeting tonight. So with that, I'd like to just sort of pause for a moment of silent reflection and consider all those folks in our community and beyond who are afflicted with COVID-19 or have recovered from, and just have some thought for those folks. Thank you very much, everybody. This evening we have a fairly light agenda, but with some quite interesting material on it. So there is the prospect that the meeting will come to its logical conclusion a little earlier than maybe otherwise, but I'm also sure there'll be some conversation around the items on the agenda as well. So I'll ask if anybody has a declaration of conflict or of interest. Seeing none, we have earlier we convened a closed session to look at committee appointments to council, and also for an educational presentation by our insurer to council. So we're just going to consider those items through resolution and or motion, and then we'll move on to the regular portion of the meeting. So I have here a motion moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Downer, that further to the verbal report of the Deputy Clerk and confidential criteria-based matrix provided to the closed meeting session of Council held January 20th, 2021, regarding committee appointments, council confirms the following: that Paul Crouch be appointed to the Seniors Council, that Linda Hillman be appointed to the Ontario Best Butter Tart Festival Steering Committee, that all appointments shall be for a term consistent with the term of council, and that administration continue to recruit for vacant board and committee appointments. Council, you've heard the motion, comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you, and that's unanimous. Next, we have a motion moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Ross, or sorry, Deputy Mayor Ross, I beg your pardon. Is the Deputy Mayor here yet? No.
He's attempting to get in.
Okay, so Councillor Gordon, would you care to second? Thank you. So again, moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Gordon. The council receives information, the informational update and presentation provided in closed session by Ms. Robin McCleave, Vice President, Public Sector Risk Management Leader, BFL. Any comments or questions around this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That carries as well. So the next motion I have is approval of the agenda. And that's moved by Councillor Cunningham and seconded by Councillor Prost, that the contents of the regular council with closed session agenda for January 20th, 2021 be approved. All those in favor? Thank you, that carries. We also have, just a note here somewhere on this one. So I have a motion by Councillor Gordon, seconded by Councillor, she's not here. So Councillor Main, would you second? Thank you. So moved by Councillor Gordon, seconded by Councillor Main, that items and related recommendations contained within the January 20th, 2021 consent agenda as consent items having been considered by council be adopted. Now, one of the items on the consent agenda has to do with the statements. The motion. I got this right? Yes, I think so. No, I don't have this right. Sorry. Comments or questions? Let's see, Councillor Gordon has a comment or question, and Councillor Main.
Thank you, Worship. This is just a quick one for the CAO. On our CIP, there was some correspondence from the 18th of December surrounding an attempt to provide some financial relief to the Midland YMCA. And I know Mr. Deneau and I had some discourse online or on email about this, and I committed to asking him about it just to try and clarify a bit more. I learned through a newspaper article that an attempt was made to effectively lend some money to the YMCA because they have a deficit for capital and also operational issues, and that was unsuccessful and that they turned it down. It didn't explain any other details, so I reached out to Mr. Deneau and asked if he'd be ready to speak to that a little bit tonight, because I know the YMCA had approached us without a financial asks per se, but with the indication that there would be something coming, and it looks like we attempted to reach out to them and do something that didn't work out. And I wanted to know if we could talk a bit about that, and if there were any other alternatives for them, because I'd certainly hate to see us lose their resources to this community. Mr. Deneau.
Mr. Deneau, do you have, can you shed some light on this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Gordon, and I'm sure the other councillors are interested as well. I did provide the update in the CIP. In terms of timeliness, I wanted to make sure the information was shared. We didn't have a council meeting at the time, so I wanted to take the advantage of that to make sure you were aware of what went on with those discussions. As we were instructed by council when they made their deputation staff were asked to work with the YMCA and see if there were any alternatives that we could offer to support them. We were asked to do that as a North Simcoe team, so certainly the other municipalities participated in that. So Tiny, Tay, Penetanguishene, and ourselves did meet with the YMCA on a number of occasions. We also met internally to discuss what alternatives we would jointly be able to offer them in terms of assisting them. And I think those discussions went really well. We did spend some time in confidence, and the YMCA asked us to make sure this was done in confidence because they were talking about their business. But we were able to offer our perspective on their situation, and there were a number of alternatives we did discuss. All of those alternatives, and we made this very clear, all of those alternatives required council support. So if we did come up with something that was appealing to the YMCA, the respective CAOs would have went back to council for approval. So there were no offers officially made. We did talk about a number of alternatives to potentially assist them. At the end of the day, though, the YMCA determined that they could best address their needs on their own. So they thanked us certainly for the insight we provided them on our perspective on running the situation. They thanked us certainly for the time and attention that we gave to the matter. We did leave them with, if you find you do require some assistance from the municipalities, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll engage again and see how we can help you from that regard. So in the end, the staff did their due diligence, again, across all 4 municipalities. In the end, the YMCA made their decision on how they felt they could best handle their matter, and it resulted in us not having to come back to council with any recommendation. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Councilor Gordon.
Just thank you very much. I just wanted to, get that out there so people could understand the process that we truly are. When I say we, I mean you guys, the CAOs, made an earnest attempt to try and be ahead of this process because they haven't asked us for anything, and we are all equally concerned about their viability. So although it came out differently while I was communicating online about it, as it seems to be my hallmark, I do appreciate your efforts and the fact that we've tried. And not that we're going to wash our hands and give up. Maybe they'll come back to us again, but I do appreciate your efforts and understanding that the best thing we could offer at the time didn't align with their needs. So fair enough, and thanks for the try.
I just add to that tomorrow I have a meeting tomorrow at 1 with the general manager of the Y, Ms. Murray, and she also is setting up meetings with the other 3 mayors, the local municipalities, to give an update as to where the Y is and how they, I guess, plan to proceed. So we'll have a better understanding of where they are in the new year, I guess, tomorrow. Councillor Main, you had your hand up, I believe.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to the minutes of the Active Transportation Committee. There's a motion coming forward, but I was speaking with the clerk. We're packaging that up for council's consideration. A resident put forward the idea of the pathway between Hugo and Cook to be not just a pathway, but potentially a pollinator pathway. She reached out to me, other councillors, and we've reached out to the high school, we've reached out to staff, and we've reached out to the developer on the Cook side. So it's basically to earmark basically an in-principle approval of advancing this trail improvements. It is on our parks plan and I believe our multimodal plan. And so we're speaking with staff and trying to kind of put together a collaborative approach to how to beautify a space. It's much more than just a pathway. It's a very popular spot to be hanging out at. And the residents on Hugo and Cook both want to see some improvements on the pathway. So look forward to that motion coming forward, but I thought I'd mention it and that the Active Transportation had discussed it and wanted to put it forward for council's consideration from the Active Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Any other matters before I put the motion on the floor? I'd just like to clarify that in consent agenda, there is the Midland Bay Landing Development Corporation Annual General Meeting minutes And they are amended. You'll notice they're amended. And the amendment is that it was originally suggested that the financials were draft. In fact, they were final. So for council's understanding about what you would be approving here in the consent agenda, those financials were the final from the audited statements. So just so we're clear. So with that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Gordon, seconded by Councillor Main, that the items and related recommendations contained within the January 20th, 2021 consent agenda as consent items having been considered by council be adopted. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That carries. I see the Deputy Mayor has joined us. Welcome. So then I have a motion by Councillor Downer, moved by Councillor Olszewski, or seconded by Councillor Olszewski, I beg your pardon. The council resolve into the committee of the whole. Comments or questions around that? Not seeing any. All in favor? Thank you very much. And Deputy Mayor, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Welcome everybody to the first meeting of 2021, and we have no presentations, but we do have two deputations. And the first is coming from Principals Integrity, and I see Miss Atwood and Mr. Abrams are with us today. So I'll turn it over to you. I'll remind you that you have 10 minutes for the presentation, and please stick around. I'm sure we'll have many questions for you after. So the floor is all yours. Thank you for coming this evening, and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you too. And thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Council, for taking a few minutes of your evening for us. I will be doing most of the talking or a few brief words of presentation. I hope not to take up the whole 10 minutes. And my partner, Jeff Abrams, is also available, and we'll try to just go through at a high level and open ourselves up to any questions you may have. It's certainly been a very auspicious day in government. I'm sure many of you were tuned in to the inauguration south of the border, and I think that it bodes well, and all of the focus on civility and dignity and respect certainly bodes well. I would say that this report covers the 2-year period since our appointment as Integrity Commissioner for the town of Midland. And we recognize that there was a bit of a rocky start, I think, initially in the first part of that period. And so a little bit of high level reminder to really the public, because I think council is very familiar with our services, but from the public's perspective, it's important to recognize that the primary role for an integrity commissioner is really to serve as a resource when members of council need confidential advice with respect to some area that may be unclear. Often it's something with respect to conflicts of interest or other areas of ambiguity that they need a little clarification on. That's one of the primary areas, as well as providing education and training to members of council. Usually in the period following elections, we come in and provide some education and training to members of council on their responsibilities under the code of conduct, as well as the conflict of interest. We had the opportunity to work with Midland to bring forward a new code of conduct early in the term. And we think that in a large part, there has been really good work with council for the town of Midland. We are the residual function, which most people think about for an integrity commissioner, is the reviewing, receiving complaints and investigating complaints. We see that as a necessary residual function, but really not the primary area that integrity commissioners can provide service as a resource to municipal councils. But in any event, we all of that information is set out in the report, which is before you, and I won't drag you tooth and nail through it. You're probably quite familiar with those areas that we function and provide service in to you. The activities that we provide service to really fall into three categories, and you'll see in the report that we talk about those. And one, of course, is policy development, education, and training, and we've spoken of that. The next area is really responding to requests from members of council for written advice. And when we do that, we do it on a confidential basis. So members of council can seek advice from us, and we provide that in writing, and it really bulletproofs members of council. It helps guide them when they're dealing with an area where they may not be clear on what they should or should not do. And then if there is a complaint, the member of council has complied with the written advice of the Integrity Commissioner, and there really can be no complaint follow through. So it's really in that area, as you'll see in the report, on 11 occasions through the past 2 years, this is a 2-year period covered by this report, we have provided written advice in response to requests from members of council. And so that is what we see as a very important aspect of the work we provide to you. In terms of complaints, yes, we did see quite a number of complaints initially. It has subsided significantly. We had 14 complaints, and of those, we were able to resolve or what we call dispose of without need for a full investigation and a public report in 10 of those. 4 of those complaints resulted in full investigations and reports to council, and they were public reports, and we won't go back over the areas covered. But that's for the full 2 years that we are dealing with under this report, or the just short of 2 years dealing under this report. We would, I want to say a couple of words about matters which we receive complaints on and how we dispose of those. So when we review a matter, we may get a complaint that is operational in nature, and we will refer the complainant to the appropriate department or CAO of the organization on operational matters. If a matter is not within jurisdiction, obviously that's not something we deal with, but often we will receive complaints and we review those and determine that it's something that can be resolved without a full investigation and without a public report, which can be costly. And so we do that. We exercise that opportunity where we can. And in those cases, we provide a reasoned explanation back to the complainant so that they understand why we're not finding a contravention and why we're not moving forward with the report. And we provide a summary of that back to the respondent member. Where we have had to report publicly, of course, we've already spoken of that. We do recognize that in the first year and a half, it did seem we were experiencing quite a bit of activity. We really have observed that that activity has really subsided. It seems to us that there's been an awful lot of really positive learnings, and that there's been a lot of very positive adjustments. And we are very hopeful that we will have far fewer complaints over the course of the next period than we saw in the past. It does seem to be transpiring that way, and we're most hopeful that that will be the case. We did have the clerk conveyed that we would be expected to speak to the costs. And so I'm anticipating that that's a question that I will be asked. And so I can tell you that over the course of this 2-year period, we have spent the time on the 4 major investigations that were public reported on, about $30,000 all in. Each investigation on average running between $6,000 and $8,000 for the time that we put into it. In terms of the balance of the work that we've done for you, for advice and the complaints that were resolved, that's advice responding to 11 requests for written advice, and the balance of the complaints that were not required to be reported on, $8,000 all in. And then add in the HST, and that's been our cost over the past 2 years. So it's running about roughly, from your perspective, $20,000 a year. As I say, we recognize that it was a bit of a busy or rocky start from that perspective, from the perspective of individuals availing themselves of the Integrity Commissioner, and we have seen that subside quite significantly over the past, I'm going to say, 6 to 8 months. And we expect that to continue in that way. So we're most hopeful that it will. Although we do enjoy working for the town of Midland, we're hoping not to see quite as much of you. And we're open to questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments with regards to the presentation? Anyone? Mr. Abrams, anything to add? Or sorry, I have Mayor Strathern. Your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There's been commentary around the notion that the code of conduct and the process of the Integrity Commissioner examining complaints has the potential to be, I believe the word is weaponized. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if you could speak to that somewhat, just sort of your sense of whether that's the case or not, and what safeguards are there to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Ms. Atwood?
Yes, that's a fair question. We don't observe that it's being weaponized per se in the town of Midland. However, we think that certainly one of the best safeguards against weaponizing the code of conduct, and we understand by that it's when members of council use or resort to the code of conduct or to the Integrity Commissioner, rather than speaking to each other. We think one of the best safeguards against that is a good communication between members of council. And when there's a concern, we really encourage members of council to try to sort that out offline if they have to, have some conversation. It really comes down to communication and civility and respect. So.
Follow up, Your Worship. You're muted.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think it'll be a little hard to find the unmute button. I think within council, and I would agree that we've all sort of come to a point where we're quite willing to have a conversation with each other. I know that Ormond, well, I won't name them. There's a couple of townships that are having significant issues with members of the public using the process, either from the perspective of a grudge or grudge vendetta, that perspective, or just to get a stage that they might not otherwise have, and so that presents a sort of an interesting challenge, because we don't, other than direct communication with the individual, and then assuming that the individual is willing to hear what you have to say, digest it, and then come to some sort of a resolution. Barring that, then I know for some councils, they've actually passed bylaws now looking at charging for access, and in particular, MPIPA is being abused in some respects, but I can see where the Integrity Commission component might be. Any words of wisdom around that one, other than the communication piece?
Perhaps I could field that, Mr. Chair. Our experience, speaking broadly across our client base, is that it's actually quite helpful for municipalities and municipal councillors to have their constituents have access to an integrity commissioner, because it's really quite a small minority of cases of complaints that we receive that actually proceed to investigations. It's only in the order of 12 to 15%. And the rest of them, some of the bulk of the rest of them might be outside our jurisdiction or relate to staff or something like that. But a good chunk of them relate to some displeasure a constituent has with a member of council. And through conversation or by an explanation or by facilitating some informal resolution, the parties walk away from the process more or less satisfied. And it is true, if you focus on reports, the investigations and reports, they are costly. But I'm sure you've heard us say, and others will have heard us say, we would much prefer to give the advice and head it off and not have to undertake an investigation. So our entire business model, our approach to the matters really is focused on education, advice, and informal resolution. So we've not had the experience where we've at least knowingly been used as a weapon against members of council. Those kinds of complaints are usually triaged out pretty early.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments with regard to this item? Councillor Gordon?
Thank you very much. I know I've said this at least a couple of times, that I've availed myself of Principals Integrity's advice on many occasions. I'm just trying to think of those 11 requests for advice. I could think of 5 or 6 of them that are probably me. So, I'm probably responsible for 4K. Sorry, folks. But the caveat here is that the advice you get for the Integrity Commissioner is only as sound as the facts that you provide them on which they rely to give you that advice. So it's not a matter of, cherry picking what you tell them, getting their advice and bulletproofing yourself. You need to give them everything. They give you an honest opinion based on everything you give them, and you follow that advice, even if it doesn't align with, what you were hoping for when you approached them in the first instance. I can say that I think in all the cases I've sought their wisdom, their advice does kind of align more or less with what I was looking for, or what I believed in the first instance, and they validated that, and I followed it religiously. And clearly where I've slipped up, it's not places where I've sought their advice. It's kind of just where I shoot from the hip, and someone calls me to task for it. So fair enough. I take those spankings and learn from them. I do want to say that my last go around here, which was the one about the developer and stay in the lane conversation that ensued, I did have a lot of commentary after with people that felt either let down by that decision or bewildered at how could that be. And the conversation that I had with everybody that reached out to me after that was that, and I want to get some validation here from Principals Integrity tonight, is we're still free to listen to people's tales of woe and issues they have with the municipality or some service delivery or something they're not happy about. And we're still free to, if we want to, create a notice of motion, which is our way of setting council agenda items and bringing it to council, which could end up in it getting redirected to staff, or maybe council decides to do something on their own. All that could play out and potentially was going to play out with the Taylor Drive issue, but it didn't play out that way because I didn't bring the notice of motion and it got dealt with otherwise. So I just wanted, and I've been telling people, don't stop calling us. It's not that we're going to get in trouble for speaking to you or listening to your problems or trying to advance them or help you. It's just a particular set of circumstances in that one that didn't work out well. So I just wanted to make sure that what I'm telling people and what I still believe aligns with reality. If I could just get some feedback from Principals Integrity.
Through the mayor, yes, definitely. That's absolutely That's absolutely correct. Members of council are certainly one of the purposes that they serve for their constituents is a point of contact, but then the member of council should be passing individuals along in the appropriate cases to the appropriate staff. So absolutely.
I just want to apologize to the deputy mayor for forgetting that I'm not running this portion of
That's
the meeting.
fine. No problem. We're good. Thank you. Follow up, Councilor Gordon? Sorry, I thought I saw your hand.
No, that was it. I just wanted to make sure that the takeaway is that, you know, what we do normally and traditionally have been doing is okay. It's just, you know, there's ways you can, you know, fall out of your lane a little bit that gets you spanked. So to anyone that was concerned, oh no, we can't call our counselor anymore with a problem, like, that's not the case. And that's what I've been reiterating, and hopefully everyone else is getting that from this too.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? I see none. I'd like to thank Principals Integrity for coming this evening, and hope we don't get to see you again this year, but only for good things anyway. So thank you so much for your time, and we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, all.
Thank you. Happy New Year. All right, next, Madam Clerk, we have up is Midlands Age-Friendly Community Plan, and we have Miss Ball to do a presentation from J Consulting Group. Miss Ball? Welcome to coming this evening, Miss Ball. Is it Miss Ball?
It is, yes. Good
Yes.
evening. I'm going to
Wonderful.
change my name here.
No, you're fine. I'll remind you that you have 10 minutes and to please stick around. We may have a few questions for you after.
Absolutely.
The
And
floor,
thank you.
the floor is all yours. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, and members of council, staff, and community members. My name is Jody Ball, and I'm the director at J Consulting Group, a small Canadian consulting firm. I have had the pleasure of working with your community, your staff, the Midland Seniors Council on developing the Town of Midland Age-Friendly Community Plan, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you about that this evening. So we can go to the next slide. Before I talk about the Midland Age-Friendly Plan, I do want to just take one moment to talk about age-friendly communities and age-friendly planning. It really started as a framework about 15 years ago. The World Health Organization developed the Global Cities Age-Friendly Project, and it brought together cities from around the world, including 3 in Canada, who had an interest in supporting healthy aging by creating communities that were more age-friendly. And the activities of that project identified 8 key areas of community life in which communities can become more age-friendly. And those 8 activities have become more well known as the 8 dimensions of an age-friendly community through the World Health Organization. And those are the dimensions that you see on that wheel. Hopefully you can see the screen and you see those different components in the circle. And it really highlights how broad age-friendly planning goes, and also highlights one of the things I like the most about it is that it looks at our physical environments as well as our social environments. So when we talk about age-friendliness and age-friendly planning, we're talking about things like transportation, housing, outdoor spaces, and buildings. We're also talking about our community supports and health services, communication, information, civic participation, as well as our social participation and social inclusion. Next slide. So the purpose of our work and the purpose of the project is to identify age-friendly needs across the town and develop a plan to set the town on a path to becoming a more age-friendly community. Our objectives throughout the process, next slide, please. As defined by the terms of reference, were to facilitate an age-friendly vision, guiding principles, identify age-friendly priorities across the town based on those World Health Organization 8 dimensions that we just mentioned, to conduct focus groups in the community, engage with the community, to consult with the Seniors Council, to present an age-friendly community plan to council, and to provide project updates along the way. Next slide. So our work began in the spring of 2020 a very interesting time, as we're all well aware. And I would like to commend the town and the Seniors Council for their dedication to continue the important work during such a challenging and evolving time. So as I said, we started in the spring of 2020. We developed a consultation and communication plan. From there, we developed a community profile, which included a review of current policies and plans. So taking a look at some of your plans, like your strategic plan, your Parks and Trails master plan, the transportation plan, as well as looking at things, documents at the county level, such as the housing and homelessness plan, and took a snapshot of demographic and socioeconomic indicators. In June, we began a community engagement program, starting with the development of a robust needs assessment survey. We had a planning meeting at that time with Seniors Council and officially launched the survey at the end of June. That survey ran for the summer months, and at the end, we had a total of 188 responses. We also held some telephone interviews in July with various organizations, including the Family Health Unit, Simcoe County Social Housing, Waypoint Center, Georgian Bay Friendship Center, Age Friendly Simcoe County, and Midland Accessibility Advisory Committee. And we held a virtual focus group in July. All engagement was done virtually, of course, during this time. In addition, we also created content for the Town of Midland website that provided an overview of the project and identified ways to be involved. Following the first round of engagement, we developed an age-friendly framework. And at this time, we met again with the Seniors Council in September to review the needs identified and to explore an initial age-friendly vision, principles, and discuss actions. From there, in October, we prepared an age-friendly plan and held our virtual community workshop in November. At that time, we met again with the Seniors Council to discuss the final draft plan, and the final age-friendly plan was finalized and submitted in December. And that brings us to today. Next slide, please. I would like to take an opportunity to acknowledge that the Midland Age-Friendly Community Plan was created with the support and direction of staff and the Midland Seniors Council. So a special thanks to committee members, Frida Baldwin, Judy Cotton, Cher Cunningham, Bridie DeRoche, Deborah Diane Smith, Diane Enns, Larry Ferris, and Barbara Nechtel. And a special thanks and appreciation to members of the community and organizations who took the time to fill out that survey, attend our workshop, and provide insights into the plan. Next slide. This is just a little quote that I wanted to share. It's one of the many quotes from the survey, and I just wanted to share that with you on the slide there. Okay, next slide. So a key component of our work was to take a look at community needs, and I'm not going to go through them in detail this evening, but I do want to just point to the needs assessment, the profile that is in the community plan, as well as in one of the background documents if you are looking for more information. And I'll just point to the aging of the population as probably one of the biggest needs. So growth in Midland from 2001 to 2016 has been fairly modest at about 4%. And while this is slower than the rates for the county as well as the province, the town of Midland has an older population when we compare it to the county and the province. And I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but I do think it's important to point out, and it highlights the importance when we look at our age-friendly planning, that 50% of the population of Midland in 2016 was over the age of 50, and a quarter of the population was over the age of 65. Next slide. So again, I'm not going to talk specifically about the community needs identified this evening, but I'll just, I have this slide just to show you that, again, sticking with our framework of the World Health Organization age-friendly community planning, we did take a look at the 8 dimensions when we were looking at community need. The survey, for example, focused questions on each of these areas, and our demographic snapshot looked at various available statistics for each of these areas. Next slide, please. So For our plan, we developed a vision with our community, with our seniors council, and our vision is a community where people of all ages and abilities have opportunities to work, play, and live well. Next slide. We have 4 principles. We are inclusive. We are a community that is accessible, equitable, and welcoming to all. We are accountable. We are committed to the community to report back on initiatives and updates. We are respectful, a community that recognizes and values all individuals, and we are collaborative. We have a shared responsibility among community members and partners to improve the lives of older adults. Next slide. Overall, we've put forward 41 recommendations within the age-friendly community plan. These are again organized by those 8 dimensions of an age-friendly community. I am not going to go through them this evening in detail, but again, just wanted to point that they are there, and they're again organized by the 8 dimensions. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. So if we can just move to slide 20 now, actually. It'll be the one titled Next Steps. One more. There we go. Thank you. So importantly, realizing the vision, the age-friendly vision for the town of Midland requires the collective effort of a broad range of stakeholders, including staff and community partners, to come together to work towards implementing the actions identified within. For example, there are a number of initiatives that are already underway within the town, being pursued by both partners and staff, such as looking at public spaces and making sure they're more accessible. I know there's work underway with that right now in the town. And I'd like to thank Andy Campbell, who provided insights on the draft age-friendly plan and provided feedback on how some of the objectives are currently being incorporated into existing planning efforts. There's also efforts underway at the provincial level through health initiatives and at the county level through housing initiatives in particular that impact age-friendly planning in the town of Midland. So further to the actions identified within the plan, there are some recommendations for implementation that I'll just touch on quickly before I wrap up. And the first is an age-friendly coordinator. And this can be within an existing position, a staff member, or it could be a new part-time position. The role would be to coordinate efforts of age-friendly planning, liaise with staff and community partners and the Seniors Council, assist in communication of age-friendly initiatives that are underway within the town, perhaps also seek out additional funding opportunities. And the other step that I'm suggesting is also a call to action. And what I mean by that is bringing back the stakeholders, the organizations that were involved in the age-friendly planning process, to come back, share back with them that plan, the community plan that has been developed, and see where there are some opportunities for organizations to be champions of some of those actions. I've done it before where, you know, organizations stand up and say, yes, we'd like to take this action on, or I'm going to bring this back to my board, and we're going to implement this in our next 2 years, or we're going to add this to our strategic plan. So sharing back where we landed with our community plan with our stakeholders, and also seeing of where we can partner with them in the future. From there, I'm suggesting that a full implementation plan be developed, including timelines, lead roles, resources. I'm also suggesting there be annual reporting back to the community and a more detailed review in 5 years. And that's it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. I see a few people have some questions for you. I'll go to Councillor Main first, and then Councillor Chesky. Councillor Main.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Ball. That was, it's great that you guys have been put together. I know Cher and the Seniors Council, Councillor Cunningham and the Seniors Council have been very excited. And obviously I'm very excited anytime there's a plan that says we need to prioritize active transportation and other public realm improvements. So that's delightful to see. And I think when you break it down, it's little simple improvements, plant some trees, it makes the town look beautiful, but it adds comfort, a couple of benches here and there, little things like that. It's the attention to detail. The one question that I had is a lot of this age-friendly planning caters towards aging in place, our seniors. The one question is that often sometimes is overlooked is the youth component. And we've struggled how to roll out youth engagement. And was just curious about how we can do that. And if that has a component in the age-friendly planning, how we can do more youth engagement. Thank you.
Ms. Ball?
Thank you, Councillor Main, and thank you for the question. It's a good one. Age-friendly planning, I would say, is focused on all ages. However, when we follow the World Health Organization 8 dimensions, it does focus on seniors, planning, aging in place, with the philosophy being that if we plan for our seniors, if we plan for individuals that may be experiencing mobility challenges and so on, that we will in fact plan our communities for all ages. So I like to think of it as a plan for all ages, and that if we're planning for our aging population, we are planning for our community. Having said that, there are communities that are doing specific youth-friendly community planning initiatives, and there's some cool stuff going on, and I definitely see some alignments, but there's also some uniqueness to them. I would say anything that's involving youth planning should involve youth in that planning, and that would sort of be the key difference. It's engaging with youth. This process, while it didn't exclude people of all ages from participating, it definitely targeted our population over the age of 50.
Oh, well, that's great. I guess it's an offshoot. It's a thing that we always keep thinking of. And the transportation world uses the term all ages and abilities. And I just love that, bike lanes, sidewalks for all ages and abilities. And I think that's very inclusive. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilor Olszewski?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Probably no surprise that my question was the same one there around youth. So I won't echo Councilor Main's comments, just say that I do support a little more use of the word youth in that plan would be great. It would probably be enough. We can talk about the parallels and the things that don't align when we get there. But yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Councilor Cunningham?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is going to be kind of a question, kind of a sneaky insert of a statement and a thank you at the same time. I really want to thank Jody and the entire Seniors Council. I also want to thank staff. Andy Campbell worked with our staff to review the findings and the considerations that came about in this report, and gave some great feedback on things that are actually already underway, so that we can see, first of all, how on top of things our town is when it comes to some of these initiatives. Some of them, as Andy said, are like 80 years out. They're underway, but some of them take a huge budget to put into place. And it's important for our Seniors Council to be able to see that, and that communication with staff and Seniors Council has been beautiful. It also highlighted, I think, Jody, communication. And I think that's something that comes up in a lot of these plans for age friendly, is how to engage and communicate with our seniors so they know what's going on and the initiatives. And I wonder if you can speak to how that age friendly coordinator position or those calls to action might possibly pull some of that communication piece forward for us.
Ms. Ball?
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Yeah, communication, I think, it's so important, but it can also be some fairly quick wins. I don't think there's a lot we need to do to implement some of the strategies that are identified within the plan. I think we've started, again, we've been at this for, I think it ended up 8 months or so. We have built some momentum in the community. We have created some more awareness of age-friendly planning, what it is. We engaged about 250 people in the process. So some of the things I was thinking could be done, initially is to build on. I know we did create a landing page for age-friendly planning. Can we create something similar for moving forward? Perhaps populating it with existing resources. One of the things we heard a lot about was, I don't know what's available. There's a lot of services available within Midland. There's services that maybe not operating necessarily right in town, but that would come into town. And sometimes people just aren't aware. So if we can connect people, that's a win-win. And it doesn't take a lot of resources. So we were talking about, content for a website, and that might be something that a coordinator could help pull together content. And then with the support of, I think it's Randy, I hope I got Randy's name right, to help put that on the website or put out those social media posts. He was super helpful in our process in posting little announcements and updates along the way. So just continuing that kind of education, I think would be great.
Follow up, Councillor Cunningham? Mayor Strathern?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Fabulous report. It's nice to see people thinking too about beyond just the seniors element in the population, although that is a significant component of our population. I guess my question is, we have a number of organizations within the town and external to the town that have been reasonably, I would say, successful in engaging young people from different portions of that age group. Right? And I'm just wondering whether you see any examples of where municipalities would pull them into a sort of a unifying group or committee to look at where the gaps are and enacting on those gaps, rather than the municipality necessarily engaging with the young people when these people seem to be successfully doing that. Do you know of any examples of that sort of an approach?
I'm not sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say often it's similar to a task force is what's often set up. If we're talking about youth or we're talking about seniors, I know Midland has our seniors council, and I would say one of the suggestions for that, and I know the seniors council, we met earlier this week, and they're keen to bring together some of those partners that did participate, from health services, from the county level, so that we're continuing those partnerships. And I would say with youth, it would be similar. I'm not sure of an organization, municipality that has sort of an all ages. I know some organizations have what they call like a lived experience task force, and that may include, for example, people with disabilities, seniors, youth, perhaps even people who have experienced homelessness. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does in a way. I think of tiny townships. Is it Jaden? Young man they've hired, and he's working very diligently with young people in tiny township. They were going to host a summit of sorts in town. Unfortunately, COVID got in Midland, the facility, but the COVID got in the way.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Yes, so sorry, I thought you were referring to more of a group, like an advisory. Yeah, there's communities that will have, so some communities will hire their own age-friendly coordinators. Some will do it through, say, a community health center might have an age-friendly coordinator, or they might have an outreach worker, which would be more broad, that might go to youth as well. Some might have what they would call a community animator, which is somebody that goes out and does outreach and tries to, attend, whether it's a youth group meeting or a senior, and sort of report back as one individual. I have seen that.
Any other questions for Ms. Ball? Councillor Gordon?
Thanks. It's well, actually kind of for everybody. I mean, we have this plan. It's a fantastic plan. I really enjoyed reading it. It's obviously a culmination of a lot of hard work. I'd like to see this merged into our strategic plan now that we have this, so that, much like we do with our current objectives, as new initiatives and priorities and strategies come place, we kind of align them with things that are found in this age-friendly plan and make sure that, we've always considered this plan now that we have it in our decision-making process. I share Councillor Shefsky's concern that we don't want to have the youth sort of feel like age-friendly means, not them. And, arguably the older folks in our community are seniors. I mean, they bought and paid for everything that we have and enjoy right now. And there's an expectation that we look after them. And, in a cruel stroke of irony, they're the ones that are being taken out largely by COVID-19. So here we have a plan that aims to deal with all different ages, but there is a focus on seniors. And I would definitely like to see the initiatives that we bring forward, especially as we're talking budget in the next month or so, how they align with this plan, the same way we do with parks and trails and our other master plans. So I do appreciate all the time and effort that went into this. I wish we'd had more engagement than the numbers, the 250 or so that participated. But I mean, I think we can say that about everything we try. Engagement tends to be pretty low. But we did get that response, and clearly put together a good plan as a result. So congratulations to everyone involved. And now it's really up to us as a collective to put it into action where we can financially.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any other questions or comments? I see none. Thank Ms. Ball for coming, and greatly appreciate your time, and your presentation was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from,
Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
There is a motion with respect to that matter and the one for the Integrity Commission just to receive it.
Okay, I apologize. I don't have them in front of me. Would some?
That's okay. I was going to send them off to you, but I was thinking you might not be checking your emails while you're.
Oh, you can send them to me if you like.
Okay.
Oh, I think I have them here. I have a I have the first one. If you'd like to send the second one, Madam Clerk, that'd be great. So we had a motion that came out of our Integrity Commissioner report this evening. Moved by Councillor Main, second by Councillor Cunningham, that Council receive as information the 2020 update of Integrity Commission services provided by Principals Integrity. Any questions or comments with regards to that item? I see none. All in favor? So passed. Thank you so much. And Madam Clerk, I don't have the second motion, but we can come back to it if you like. Or should we hold on a minute?
It'll be on its way in a moment.
Oh, wonderful. I love technology, isn't it? Great. So we'll allow that to come through. If it's all right with the committee, we'll come back to the motion as I receive it, but we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the update with regards to affordable housing. And it's an update regarding Council's task force on affordable housing. And we have former Mayor McKay. Thank you for joining us this evening. And sorry, I see Mr. Labracroix. I apologize if I got your name wrong.
It's Lebrec.
Lebrec. Oh boy, I got it really wrong. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Mr. Is your worship, sorry, Mayor McKay there?
You there? Just there we are. I think we're now part of the meeting.
Good to see you this evening, Mr. McKay. How are you?
Deputy Mayor Ross, it's a pleasure to be before council again.
Happy New Year. Welcome back.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
I'll turn it over to you, and we'll have a motion that comes out of it for council, but I'll allow you for your presentation. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, members of council, it's really a pleasure to be before you again, albeit from quite a different vantage point this evening. Back in June of last year, you established a council task force on affordable housing. And we have been busy for the last 6 months answering the task and the questions you set before us. So we felt very appropriate that we have an interim update for you this evening and just let you know what we've been up to and what we're looking forward to at least in the next 6 months. But before I turn it over to Mr. Lebrecq, who's going to take the first part of this presentation, just wanted to very quickly put before you the members of this task force. We've been very fortunate to have very experienced members from the private sector, Mr. Tom Cowley, who is a developer in Toronto and has got an awful lot of development experience. Mr. Ted Phelps, who I suspect many of you do know, is a developer in the area, and he has both built and operated housing and even affordable housing. From council, we have Mayor Strathern, as well as Councillor Main have joined us on this council. Mr. Dan Lebrecq, who spoke very briefly there for a second, is a consultant who is working with us. He's got a lot of expertise in housing development, housing operations, and has consulted with quite a number of municipal governments. And I'd also like to call out Mr. Rob Elliott, who has worked with us virtually every meeting and been very helpful in organizing our thoughts and assisting us with the process through staff. And last but not least, maybe, is myself. I'm very pleased to be the chair of this committee. So with that introduction out of the way, Mr. Lebrecq, if you're ready, I'd like you to take the first part of this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor and members of council, to present or help present the task force first major milestone report on this very important initiative. It's very clear to me this council already has a clear understanding about how its citizens have been impacted by the continuing shortfall of affordable and appropriate housing. As Chair McKay said, last summer you took the first big step in establishing this task force and giving it the mandate to bring some concrete measures in regards to this strategic priority. In this business case, the interim business case, which was included in today's agenda, reflects the team's initial findings and recommendations. Next slide, please. The business case sets out in great detail the reality of the situation here in Midland. The town is home to many individuals and families that are income challenged and for whom getting appropriate housing is becoming exceedingly challenging as market forces continue to drive both rental and home ownership costs further away from what is deemed affordable. And the benchmark for that, what's being affordable, is equivalent to 30% of your income. This challenge extends across the full continuum of residents, not just those that are eligible for social housing. The bottom line of all this is that it translates over 1,200 Midland households being deemed at some form of risk to their sustainable housing, primarily because of their financial status. Next step, please. In its deliberations and research, the task force came to the conclusion that there is no one-size-fits-all solution that would meet the needs of all citizens. Fortunately, there are already many stakeholders engaged in making a difference, including the County of Simcoe, who has the mandate to deal with social housing. As such, while we believe that it's important, and I'll say it again, it's important for the town to continue to collaborate with all stakeholders, that it should not compete with those stakeholders. As well, with its limited financial resources, the task force is recommending that the town focuses its effort on the part of the housing continuum that lies somewhere between social housing and the free marketplace. What is being characterized by many as attainable housing, different a little from affordable, but attainable housing. The targeted cohort is referred to as the missing middle by many municipalities dealing with the same critical issue. So this is not a Midland issue, this is an Ontario and a Canada issue. Residents in this group find themselves not qualified to access social housing options, but who also can't find appropriate accommodation in the free market without making a number of tough decisions. Our near-term efforts as the task force will be to explore the development of at least one project on town-owned surplus lands, and then use those findings from that process to inform refinement of a longer-term sustainable business plan for council consideration. And that, I would pass it back to Chair McKay.
Thank you very much, Dan. We have the next slide. So the task force, once it had an opportunity to meet, decided that we need to focus in three particular areas. And the first one to come out very clearly by all of our members is we wanted to do something practical, something tangible. It's fine to have a vision. It's fine to have a statement of purpose. It's fine to have a plan. We should all have those things. But with affordable housing, so much is already known, so much has already been explored, that could we advance this whole project and actually focus on a particular instance and do something to help alleviate the need in the short term. So with that, one of the first areas of focus was finding a housing build project. And we know in our heart of hearts that any municipality that's gone forward with this has usually been involved in some sort of a land proposition, that is provided land, made land available, swapped land, these sorts of things. So in an effort to get really practical, we said, let's not just talk generically. Let's not just say, well, we can offer some land. Let's look at some sites that, if we were to go forward, would be attractive to a private sector developer, and therefore would give us the information from this development that we're going to need to build the model and come back to council with a hard edge proposal. So with that, we looked through the town's land inventory and came up with 2 sites that we felt were particularly likely to be of interest to the private sector, and to use those, if you will, as the initial entry into developing a proposal that we could put affordable housing on. With those 2 in hand, we were able then to go to and find an architectural firm and ask them, what could we do with this? What kind of affordable housing, how many, what form could actually be considered for these 2 particular sites? So that's the action that's occurred to date with regard to a build project. We're also well aware, and you've heard in Mr. Lebrecht's comments initially, that this is a long-term consideration. If we thought for 1 second that one project would solve our problems, we would clearly not have understood the issue. It's taken us a long time to get to this position. It has not been resolved with many well-intentioned efforts. So we have to prepare for the longer term. So what sort of model is out there that we could use? How do we gear ourselves to provide affordable housing, attainable housing in this case, for the long term, and make sure it is available to those who want to live in it for the long term? And the third major area of interest, of course, is we're going to go through this and develop a lot of learnings. We're going to pick up a lot of information, and we must come back not only to council, but also to the public in a coherent fashion and say, this is what we discovered, here's the issue, here's the problem, and here's how we propose to resolve it. So as you can see, Mr. Lebrecht has joined us as a consultant to help us in this effort. We have developed the statement of need, which I believe you've all seen in the interim business case. I hope you've all had a copy of that. And also we've looked through many of the housing delivery models. This is where we're really very fortunate, is that so many other communities have already tried to deal with this particular problem. And it's not sort of like there's one solution, just do it and you're successful. Each community is quite unique. They have different needs, they have different resources, different challenges ahead of them. And many have taken different approaches to dealing with providing affordable housing. You go to a community like Canmore out west, and they have virtually put the money up. They bought the housing, they operate the housing, and they've been quite successful in doing that. We're looking at a couple of other communities. Halton Hills right now is trying a model where they're just offering land and seeing what comes forward. The town of Blue Mountains is one we spent a lot of time with. You're probably very familiar with that, but they have struck a housing corporation that guides all of their work in delivering affordable and attainable housing into their community. So there's many models out there, and we had to become familiar with what they were before we could come back to council and give you what we're proposing. And lastly, of course, we've got to pay for this. And we know one of our first pushbacks is don't expect the town to come up with lots of tax dollars on this. So is there a model out there, especially with the assistance of senior levels of government, that would help us pay for funding for this housing in the short term and in the long term as well? Next slide, please. So with that, we've come to this interim point. We felt that 6 months was probably long enough before we got back to you, and that's what's contained in the interim business case. So now we're looking forward to the next 6 months, and we've chosen a period to June 2021 as being a useful time frame to get us to a point where we can really put the budgets before you, the numbers before you, and the housing models before you. So we've just split this up into 2 different streams of work, one by the task force and by town staff. Town staff, as we all know, does all of the work, and the rest of us sort of take credit for it. On the task force side, we are looking to award the contract for architectural services. So right now there's an RFP out in the street looking for an architectural service firm. And we expect to have a response from that back within the week. And with that information, we'll be in a position to actually write up a proposal for developers. The good thing about this is we'll be able to scale the size of it, the costs, the likely inputs required from the town to make this thing work. The part, bullet number 3, that the task force is implement a communications plan. If there's one area that we really have not explored at all to this point, it's taking this information to a broader community. We know that the town of Midland has got to be engaged in this approach to housing. They've got to understand both generally as to what it means, what are the needs within the town and how it's likely to be resolved, and also what does it mean on their street? What is this housing likely to look like? What is it going to say about the neighborhood? And I know that all of you have dealt with good citizens of Midland on many of these questions. It's important to get the information out there and demystify exactly what we're talking about. Even such a simple term as affordable. If you ask, I think, 10 different people, you'll come up with 10 different definitions of what affordable housing actually is. In this case, we're targeted on one particular form, but in general sense, what does Midlands need in the broader sense? How much housing is actually needed out there and in what forms? These are the types of inputs that we're going to need over the next 6 months. And with that information, we'll be able to complete the business case for your consideration in June of 2021. In parallel with this, the town staff is also going to be engaged. They have to continue and finalize the outstanding OP appeals. As you're well aware, these are key planning documents, both the OP and the related zoning bylaw. And right now, either wittingly or unwittingly, they speak very clearly to what is available in affordable housing, where housing can be zoned, the type of housing, what are the features that will make this housing acceptable, and what will make it affordable. So all of these things bear upon the arguments we're putting forward here. We have to develop a 2022 budget, and that also will include the housing commitment, because obviously it's going to take some sort of input. Is it just land? Is it going to be DC forgiveness? Is it going to be fee reduction? All of these questions we will resolve within the next 6 months. And lastly, and certainly not simply, the work of the task force. There's administrative support that's required here, a little bit of legal support and all these other issues as we put these actual proposals and the final business case together for you. Next slide, please. So that brings us obviously to the closing slide, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with these sorts of ones. It's the request that we'd like to make of council. Quite clearly, you are committed to the work of the task force and helping Midland get the affordable housing that it needs. And we're very much appreciative of that, everyone on the task force, and we look for that to continue in the period ahead. We're going to need additional resources through this period. A budget of about $50,000 for environmental studies, legal, and communications. So this is, first of all, to be able to talk seriously with developers about what's possible on these lands, what it could look like, and make sure that we've processed all of the hurdles that we can from our side, and also properly to engage the public, whether these are virtual town halls, whether we've got to conduct surveys, things of that nature as we reach out properly to the people of Midland. Staff time is obviously going to be involved. We value that at about $10,000. And last and very significantly is the town land assets. As I mentioned earlier, that quite typically in any sort of a development, the land is provided by the town, by the community. And therefore, Midland has got many land assets. Which ones can be brought forward and put into a deal, if I can phrase it like that, with the developer, so that we can get affordable housing built in our community. The task force, we've got to, as I said, reach out to the community, and we look for council to be aboard that exercise. This is not something that should be done just by a task force. Housing is too critical to the future of our community. And I know that council will certainly be there with us to make sure that the concerns and the issues raised by the community are heard and resolved, and that we all understand what we're trying to achieve with attainable and affordable housing in Midland. And lastly, we look for your support, and in everything that you do as a council, all of these questions you'll get, people are going to ask you about housing. What do you think about this? And we look forward to your support and ask that you help the work of the task force, your task force, in making sure we're successful in bringing attainable housing to the town of Midland. So that is the last of the formal parts of the slide presentation. It's now open for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay and Mr. Lebrecht, for your presentation. Any questions or comments? I see Councillor Gordon. I'll move it over to you first. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really enjoy following the task force videos on YouTube. I got to say, I love the one good thing that's come from this pandemic is the accessibility to all of these meetings. So be able to sit down at night, crack a cold one, and watch these meetings and see at the pace at which you guys are moving this forward. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Like, anyway, congrats on that. There's not a single one of us that didn't hear this at the doors when we were banging on doors a couple of years ago. And it's only gotten worse since then, the lack of affordable housing. So the mission and need for this committee, absolutely. To me, this trumps everything. If this could be our legacy, I mean, King Street, repaving that, Stop and Poo going into Georgian Bay, those are all awesome things. But if we could solve the affordable housing crisis in our community, that's the thing that I think people really, really would respect if we got out of this term. I don't have any fantasies we're going to pull it off in 2 years, but we're certainly going to, the ball's moving largely due to your efforts. So thank you very much for that. I'm just wondering in reviewing this, if like where that beautiful greenfield on Bomb Beach Road that we bought plays into the plan, because we did buy that land specifically for affordable housing and, you know, because it's almost shovel ready, I guess. We still got to service it to the county, but is that one of the candidate lands like that we're really looking at? Because I did notice the other ones that were mentioned on your report. Just wondering if you could speak to that.
Maybe you could share with us what lands you were considering, Mr. McKay.
And so, Deputy Mayor, that we started out essentially with the full list, and I've got to thank Mr. Elliott for helping us with this, but all of the lands, even though we didn't do a full study on them, were presented to us and very quickly went through them and said, which ones are most likely to attract an interest from the developer? And the simple argument here is that we can propose all sorts of things, but if nobody comes to talk to us, it's all stillborn. So we turned especially to Mr. Cowley and Mr. Phelps, who have got depths of experience in this area, and also Mr. Lebrecht, and said, what is likely to attract that interest so we can at least start talking to our developers? So with that, we did some preliminary work, came down with a short list of 3, and said, of these, which ones are we likely to be able to take forward to the development community, and came up with that list of 2. So to Mr. Gordon's, or pardon, Councillor Gordon's question, yes, the Bomb Beach Road property was talked about in a number of the meetings. It is a very large property, and it certainly augurs well for the future, but it was just of a scale and of a position that we felt we'd get much better traction from the development community with the 2 that we are currently pursuing.
You got a follow-up, Councillor Gordon?
Well, just that's a reasonable explanation for it, and you know, land doesn't decrease in value, so us having purchased it and sitting on it, and you know, continuing our servicing of that corridor, and you know, hopefully identifying it as a candidate for something in the future is good. But it is a question that I'm asked, like, hey, what about that? You guys bought that? You just gonna just leave it? So I guess the short answer is yes. For now, we'll just keep accruing in its value, and we'll have it identified for something in the future.
Just if I can just emphasize that point, you're quite correct, Councillor Gordon, that is the second bullet as to what we focused on, is we've got to look to the future. And this is not just a couple of years, these are decades. So this brings in more senior strategies about land acquisition, land consolidation, the types of housing, the different communities. And so this broader discussion is the long-term horizon. So the ones that we're looking at right now are clearly short-term. I don't want to use the term quick hit because that, I think, demeans the effort has been put into this, but what can we start, what can we use to get critical information back and also give us a solid foundation to go forward into the longer term?
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Main.
Well, I have the privilege on sitting on the committee, so I won't ask a lot of questions. I just want to make a quick comment. When we first started it, thought it was like a 110-meter hurdle. It's probably close to a 3,000-meter steeplechase combined with the Hunger Games. So we realized the challenges and complexity of the unregulated housing market. And so obviously we've identified some projects, but subsequently there are other things that the town's going to do as we have an official plan and move towards our zoning bylaw. That is the opportunity, the policy where we can start reviewing and revisiting second units, other areas, opportunities for the town to make it more amenable for people to expand their houses for infill units, second units, of all the different kinds of second units. But again, that is a very laissez-faire at, allowing others to build. And so I think this approach is we're taking a very active role with the municipal assets to try to maximize municipal assets and add housing wherever we can. So I really like the laser focus, Gordon McKay, Mayor McKay, past Mayor McKay approach of, we worked well with these great team. We've got a really good momentum going. And as Mr. Lebrecq keeps reminding us, we keep bringing more stakeholders on board, more partners, the merrier. And so I think that approach is what Midland always does anyway. So I think that approach is very applicable to us here. So I just wanted to mention the zoning bylaw and what a huge opportunity that is, but that's a completely separate opportunity where we can address a lot of the planning concerns for housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Mayor Strathern.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to make a couple comments as well, and they sort of pertain to Councillor Gordon's question. Governments don't build houses, industry builds houses. And so the approach is basically to look at how Midland, which is not mandated through the Municipal Act to deal with housing, really. We're not a separated city. County typically is the vehicle that housing's dealt with. But Midland does have clearly, you've seen in the report from the committee, an issue around housing for over 1,000 residences in town. And people tend to look at it from purely a housing lens and a social responsibility lens, but there's also an economic development lens that you have to look at this through. And we do have a service-based economy, tourism, retail, hoteliers, restaurants. And the folks that work in those areas are finding it more and more difficult. So, but what we've seen, I believe, the committee has seen, is that people, if they take a gradual approach to it and understand the relationship that needs to evolve between the municipality and those who do build houses, and what we can and can't do with those people, we can then start to grow into larger projects. And when you look at the Bomb Beach site, you may, for example, there are tranches of funding coming down from senior levels of government, and they flow through the county. So you start to build a relationship with the county, and you start to put a larger project in, for example, the Bomb Beach property, as you build out infrastructure and get the proper zoning and official plan designations and so on. So Bomb Beach does figure into it, but I think we really do as a municipality, just getting into this, take these baby steps, then you start to walk and maybe start to run. And that starts with the projects that the committee has suggested that we work with initially, and then build out. You'll notice on page, I think it's page 11 of the committee report, we talk about cost, risk, and impact. And it goes from advocacy all the way up to a housing corporation. And going to that housing corporation is a pretty big step. And so I think as we go through that continuity, that continuum of cost risk, you're going to hit a sweet spot where you'll work for a while and until you really understand the implications financially and otherwise of that particular chart, and going to a corporation, Blue Mountain, town of Blue Mountain. I think there were 12 years before they actually reached that point. That I think is the the long-winded answer to your question about Bomb Beach. Sorry to be so long-winded, but I think it required that to give it some context too. Thank you.
Sorry, cut you off, Mayor Strathern. Any last remarks, gentlemen, before we close this off? Mayor McKay or Gordon?
Mr. Chair, I think no, it pretty well stands on its own. Most of the detail, as you can see, is in the interim business case. The PowerPoint was rather light on any facts and details. We did that very purposely to make sure you saw where this is headed and what we intend to do. There's still a lot more information. We're very much looking forward to response from the architects and from discussions with developers that we can then have and get really down to the nitty-gritty as to what the costs are, who operates it, what we can expect in terms of revenues associated with it, and give council the option in June, decide whether they want to take on an attainable housing project in this term of council, and also how we gear for the long term.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming this evening. We greatly appreciate the presentation, and we greatly appreciate all the hard work from the committee. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have a motion committee that came out of this, moved by Councillor Downer, second by Councillor Gordon, that staff report CSR-2021-1 update regarding council's task force on affordable housing dated January 20th, 2021 be received for information. All those in favor? Wonderful. So moved. Thank you. And we have a little paperwork that we need to finalize. This is from a previous presentation with regards to age-friendly community, and moved by Councillor Main, second by Councillor Cunningham, that council received the age-friendly community plan presentation provided by Ms. Jody Ball of J Consulting, and that council adopt the Midland Age-Friendly Community Plan as the age-friendly community plan for the town of Midland. Any questions or comments with regards to that item? All those in favor? So carried. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is our COVID-19 update. And I'll turn it over to Mr. CEO, Mr. Deneau.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Appreciate the opportunity to update you on everything that's going on at the town in terms of the COVID situation. And as we all know, we are in a provincial-wide shutdown with the stay-at-home order. Certainly since the start of the years, nothing has slowed down. Everything continues to be pretty complicated in terms of figuring out how we deliver services. But I am happy to say that we are finding a way to continue to do that. You've seen some announcements that we certainly made that we are not allowing people to walk into town hall to receive services. We will serve them though by appointment. And just as a reminder to the public, if you do come to the town and expect to get in, we will not let you in. We will ensure that we provide you with either an appointment to return and get those services there, or we will try and do it virtually with the staff that we have in place. And we've been able to do that successfully a number of times throughout the pandemic. We want to make sure that we're certainly encouraging people to only go out for those essential things that they need to do, but we will accommodate them to help get the services that they need. So that's what's certainly taking place at Town Hall, and I appreciate everyone's patience in handling that. We're continuing to understand exactly what essential services is, what does stay at home mean, how do you enforce those things? I think it's become clear over the last week how that will be handled. There's still some fine tuning that I think all the municipalities are again still trying to interpret. Some of those are in the planning and building area, but I think we're in a good spot now where I think we can deliver good guidance to the people who want to understand what services are available. The regulations continue to get updated, as does the guidance from the health authorities. So all of that's starting to settle, and it's pretty typical of what happens with a major announcement like this. The announcement comes out, and then it takes about 2 weeks for all the specific guidance to trail it. So we're in a position now where we think we've got good interpretation. One of the changes we also made those as part of the shutdown and stay-at-home order was we took a look at our rec center facilities. The ice and the gym are closed. However, we're still offering services to the tenants that are in our building. As you know, we're providing services to some tenants who can provide essential services during this lockdown. So we've got some staff who will remain there to keep the facilities available and also do some work in anticipation of reopening when that may be. But we did take the opportunity to redeploy some staff to some other areas that we thought we could use their assistance. So there will be an announcement that goes out tomorrow, certainly on our website, but we made council and staff aware. We worked with our bargaining units, so really want to thank OPSU and IBEW for their assistance to to allow this to happen. It was with their cooperation that we were able to make these adjustments, and certainly to our staff who've been phenomenal in making sure that, one, they've got the skills to be able to be useful in the other areas, to being responsive to making those changes, and certainly for the teams in all those areas that are receiving those staff to being accommodating to them, to their schedules. So those people from the rec center have been redeployed into operations. We've got one person who's going over to assist on the bylaw front, and we've got some people assisting on the planning front, which are all very active areas. So all welcoming the additional assistance that will be provided from that perspective. It did result, however, in some layoffs. And again, that goes through the bargaining process. So about 3 people were laid off during the process, which is unfortunate, but we do hope that's temporary. But it all depends on what will happen with the situation. So we'll continue to watch that very closely. I think we all know how serious this is. Certainly in Midland, our numbers, if I checked our numbers today correctly, we were at 116 cases. We were at 16 cases before December. So through December to now, we've seen 100 cases in our community alone. So it gives you some appreciation for how quickly this thing can catch fire. Unfortunately, we also saw 5 deaths, in Midland alone. We've seen 11 deaths in the North Simcoe area, and it continues to wreak its havoc. So quite a serious situation that hopefully will get under control. Getting under control, I think, as we all know, that glimmer of hope is certainly what's going on with the vaccination front. Over 13,000 people in Simcoe, Muskoka have been vaccinated. We did receive an update from county that I believe 90% of residents in long-term care have been vaccinated in Simcoe. I believe that was the Simcoe County. So again, tremendous work being done there. It requires people to be redeployed. In the vaccination front, I think there's been an overwhelming response from retired people in the healthcare profession who have volunteered to assist on the vaccination front. We just need to get the products, obviously, to get them in the arms, as everyone says. So that's where we are in terms of handling our services. The enforcement side, I'll comment on that as well, because we're always trying to make sure that we're educating, but also enforcing what's going on in the public to make sure that those things are going on. So we work very closely with our OPP colleagues, and that on the bylaw front is pretty active. Since November 15th, we've issued over 282 tickets. We've done 12 tows. So we really don't want to do that to the public and inconvenience them. There's not some happy people when you tow their vehicles or give them tickets, but in order to be efficient and make sure we're taking care of our services, we need to do this. So please make sure you move your vehicle so we can get around and take care of the facilities. So I think that's the extent of the update, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Main first and then Councillor Gordon. And I remind that we try to keep this to COVID-19 questions, please.
Certainly. Thank you.
That was my mistake last time, by the way.
I was just looking at the weather, and the next couple of weeks look like they're going to be pretty cold. And the question is warming centers. Looks like the Simcoe Muskoka Health Unit has an updated guideline about warming centers. Unfortunately, a lot of our warming centers are municipal facilities that are not open. I believe there must be other ones in town. Is that something that the onus is on us to provide warming centers in cold, extreme weather events?
Mr. Ditto?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to Councillor Main on the question. Yes, that is one area that municipalities are struggling with a little bit. There are some traditional areas that are typically used for warming centers that just aren't available. It is, in fact, one of the opportunities I think we will have with our rec center. We have been able to accommodate some individuals who have come there during very frigid times to allow them to have some space to warm up. So we'll continue to do that. We'll make sure we check in with our partners in the community to make sure that they understand that. It is one of the reasons why we want to keep some of our staff available at that site, to have the flexibility to do that. quite frankly, there aren't many other spaces in the town that can offer that. The more traditional ones aren't able to open. So that is one of the benefits of having that facility.
Councilor Gordon?
Thank you very much. I'm really happy that we're able to redeploy those staff. We survived round one of this pandemic, not having to, lay off or terminate anybody. Found meaningful work for them that needed to be done. Arguably, we didn't call back some of our seasonals, but we were able to get them back later on. So I'm very happy to see this news that we're able to keep the people employed as much as possible. Nobody wants to go on the financing from the government. It doesn't replace your job. Speaking of COVID in our community, I think one of the biggest challenges I find in taking people's messages online primarily is people don't feel the connection. They don't know somebody that had COVID, or it seems like the numbers are overblown, and there's all kinds of people that subscribe to the wacky theories and the conspiracies out there. I just want to share personally that we've lost many people, but we've lost Jack Charlebois, who was a 30-year veteran of the Midland Police Service, Sergeant Jack Charlebois, and we lost him in late December due to COVID. Yeah, sure, he had underlying health conditions, but were not for COVID, he'd be back home recovering from his broken hip. But he got hospital-acquired COVID and died, just bam, like that. And we have, I have members of my direct family that are, they all tend to work in healthcare, and they're suffering with COVID-19 right now. They're not in the hospital, but they're at home with this new variant. And most of the family has it, so we're delivering groceries and everything to them because they can't leave their homes or go to work. COVID is in Midland. People are dying from it. People are sick from it. I just can't overstate this. I still have to go to work with my job, so I'm still physically going to work. I work remotely 1 day a week, but if you don't have to leave, don't make some wacky reason why it's important to leave your house. Stay home and don't catch COVID. And even worse, don't spread COVID, because you might be a spreader and not even know it. So I just want to call out that, absolutely respect all the people that still have to go out there and work through this. And we thank you for that, all of our frontline folks. Remembering Jack Charlebois, the first friend I have that, died of COVID-19. And we have other, people in my family that are suffering through it. I'm hopeful they're going to pull through it. And I'm sure other of you probably know somebody. It's gotten real in the community. And, we need to recognize when stay at home, even though the wishy-washy news or the rules from the government don't seem to make sense. I'll even be the first guy to say it, like, it's so ambiguous. It's left up to you. I think we all have common sense, so we know what's important, what's absolutely necessary and what isn't. And we need to start listening to that little voice in our head and not trying to find reasons why we need to be out of our houses. That being said, I wouldn't mind knowing if we've successfully laid any COVID-19 related bylaw charges. I know OPP does a lot of that, but we also have our bylaw officers that have been empowered with that as provincial offences officers. Have we laid any? And if not, I understand that we're having a position slide over to be an ambassador. But quite frankly, I think we're kind of beyond the ambassador time. If people don't get it by now, then it's time for a ticket. Like, this is not new. We've been living through this for a year and it's only getting worse. So just wondering if we're stepping up our enforcement and, laying some paper.
Mr. CEO?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to Councillor Gordon. The enforcement side, I think we've got some good clarity now in working with the OPP and the enforcement community. I know there's been a lot of discussion with the health units about educating people on the effects, and I think what you're seeing just in general is there's a bit of a shift into the education can only go so far. I think you're going to have to enforce much more strongly. What's happening out there. So I think you're going to start to see more of that. I know the health unit itself is getting around to some of the areas where we've heard some of the complaints, like the malls. Unfortunately, we're going to start patrolling areas like toboggan hills and skating rinks. And that's again, areas that hopefully the public will patrol themselves. But if we are going to see congregations, we're going to have to issue warnings, and if the people aren't listening, then we're going to have to ticket them. So I think it's one of those things that's going to continue to evolve. But I think if predicted numbers continue to rise as everyone's predicting, I think there'll be a sterner approach to the enforcement side.
Any other questions with regards to COVID-19 update? I don't see any. Mr. Deneau, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
I'll ask that this time if council has any notice of motion to bring forward. Mayor Strathern.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to be bringing a motion forward for consideration by council at the next meeting. We'll look at instructing staff to look at the ability of operations to continue winter operations on 4th Street north of Dominion, between Dominion and Bay, were we to close 4th Street at the north portion, or at the top of the hill at Dominion. So I'm going to ask that they look at putting a permanent closure in there, or at least a temporary closure, to see what the effect of it, and to look at the impacts on winter operations. And if they're not significant, then ask council to endorse the closure of 4th. Because when we look at just drive down the street and every house has a sign, please slow down, please slow down. And the number of accidents that have occurred at Hugo and 4th are, one day they're going to be fatal. They've come close, I guess, a couple of times. So people aren't listening, and the bulk of this traffic is basically redirected. It seems that you have a straight line to employment centers on Fuller Avenue in Benetton. And we've clocked people on 4th north of Bay Street approaching 140 kilometers an hour. It's just crazy. And the people on 4th Street north of Bay are engaged in traffic accidents because people are driving aggressively, speeding, and we need to slow it down.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. We'll look forward to that motion, and we'll discuss it at our next meeting. Councillor Gordon.
Well, I mean, kind of made the case for it. We could, by majority, just take that motion tonight and make it happen. Like, no, we're not closing the street tonight, but at least we're directing staff. I think, why push it off for 2 weeks? We kind of just made the pitch.
I think it's important for the public to have our input and follow procedure.
Oh, fair enough. It'll show up on the, yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah. I had a question on a different one.
Please.
So, Councillor Main, I think you, in some of the emails that we were involved back and forth, these are like friendly emails, by the way, just for the public's consumption. This was the suggestion that Mr. Simmons, Ted Simmons' name be added to the list because there was some suggestion that, perhaps a park or something be named after him. And I think in one of your responses, you said that you'd seen his name on the list, and I'd made a couple of inquiries to the clerk, but I make lots of inquiries, so maybe they slipped through the crack, and I didn't hear back. Because if he isn't on the list, then I'd like to make a notice of motion to get his name on the list of candidates. But if he is, then clearly I'm not going to do that. So perhaps you can shed some light, Councillor Main.
Well, I believe I saw his name on the road naming document when we were discussing Rick Laney Way, but it sounds like staff has responded to the resident who inquired that looks like staff are looking at two policies. They're reviewing the road policy, but also naming policy. So perhaps the notice of motion is not required, but I will check I'll check.
We'll follow that up. I think we have some time on that one, Councillor Gordon, but your question's heard, and we'll make sure we get an answer back for you. Is that fine, or did you have a notice you'd like to bring forward, sir?
No, it's fine. Like, I don't want to make a notice for the sake of a notice. So if his name's on the list, then I'm good. I'll wait.
Wonderful.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. I don't have the ability to raise my hand, and I apologize for interjecting, but I do believe that Mr. Simmons' name is on the road naming list.
Sorry, I missed the last part, Madam Clerk.
I do believe Mayor Ted Simmons, former Mayor Ted Simmons, that his name is on the road naming list, or the street naming list.
Wonderful.
I will double check, but I'm pretty sure it's there.
Okay, we'll verify that offline, and we'll make sure that if it's not, then we'll bring a notice of motion forward Councillor Gordon's request, and we'll make sure if it isn't, we'll make sure it is. So will that satisfy you, Councillor Gordon?
Absolutely. I just committed to doing that. Perfect.
Wonderful. Any other notice of motion for this evening? I see none. And we will move on to announcements. Anyone have an announcement they'd like to bring forward to council this evening? I see none. I had one if I could, but I'll move it to Mayor Strathern.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to, it really probably should have come up in the COVID-19 update, but both the Premier and Minister Clark from Municipal Affairs have engaged municipal leaders, mayors on 2 occasions this week to emphasize the imperative that people stay at home, as Councillor Gordon has said. They need to stay at home. And whatever rationalizations you make around, well, how, it's sort of not really specific. Stay at home is pretty clear. Regardless of what you might think, stay at home means stay at home. And they're very, very, very concerned that if we don't adhere to this, we are going to be in a serious world of hurt before those vaccines actually get into the public. And it's pretty clear that even until you get to herd immunity, which they're saying is 70% plus, you're going to you really should be, and the program, they've launched an initiative is basically stay at home, stay safe, and save lives. And those lives you're saving, to Councillor Gordon's point, are friends, family, relatives, neighbors, colleagues. You just don't know. So I can't emphasize enough sitting here looking at what the municipality is doing in terms of locking down, appointment only, shifting resources, and so on. It's a serious matter for those who don't believe. Give your head a shake. It's real. And be prepared to just follow those safe, wash your hands, social distancing, wear a mask. And if you have to go out, follow those. And we've been very fortunate in North Simcoe, as the CAO has said, in holding those numbers down. Let's keep it that way. I know there's been a blip, but let's keep it that way. So I really encourage all residents to stay home. If you don't have to go out, there's no reason to go out. Buying your groceries, okay. Medication, okay. Otherwise, stay home. So
thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Did I see Councillor Chesky? Councillor Chesky, it's all yours. I see it's 1-0 Oilers.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm not reporting on the Leaf game just yet. I just wanted to announce that I will be working with the Guest House Homeless Shelter on Oldest Night of the Year walk this year. So I've committed to getting the Town and Midland team together this year. I've got Councillor John Main committed already. No surprise that he signed up for the walk. I think we've done it every year since we've been on council together. So they are offering toques and stuff, but it's a very unique time. So we won't be delivering all the toques, and we won't be gathering to do the walk. Everybody's encouraged to do their walk on their own. There is another council meeting before the walk on February 20th, so I will provide more details at that time. But if you'd like to sign up for the team, reach out to me through social media, or reach out to any one of the council members. They can connect you to myself or Councillor Main. But we'll be supporting the Midland Guest House and doing the coldest night of the year walk again.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Great cause and great work. Thank you. Any other announcements this evening? Councillor Gordon?
Just a quickie that the second meeting of the Homelessness Action Committee, also known as the HAC Committee, is Thursday, the 27th, I think at 11 a.m. And it'll be streamed online. So folks that are interested in following the developments, please watch us then. If you can't watch us live, you can watch us after the fact. This will be my first meeting of the two. It's kind of embarrassing. I couldn't make the first one, but I will take time off, like holiday, if I have to make sure that my work schedule doesn't interfere with joining this one. So please join in. This is a tandem effort, nowhere near the cadence of the the Affordable Housing Committee, but it's a tandem effort, and we're trying to deal with and focus on, I think right now, the COVID-19 pandemic and its impacts on service delivery to homeless folks. That's a critical one because it's, that's the clear and present danger. So please tune in, because I'll be asking questions, not teaching anything, and we'll all learn together on what we can do as a municipality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon. Any other announcements? if I could, I just want to give a shout out to a gentleman and Marco Mancini. You may have heard in the news yesterday, donated $5 million to our local hospital, Georgia Bay General Hospital. So I just wanted to say thank you to the Mancini family, and what a donation, and it's going to go a long way to keep our community safe. So thank you so much. I like that, Councillor Gordon. But yeah, it's amazing, and what a family. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Mancini a couple times. He's been involved with the Glen Howard golf tournament over the years, and he's for a gentleman that moved here to just have a cottage, the impact he's had on our local hospital is unbelievable. So a big thank you to him and his family. So I thought it important, and a happy new year to everyone in town of Midland. Thank you. I'll move on. Unfortunately, Your Worship, I don't have a motion to get us out of this committee. Maybe you do, but if you could read it, we could move on to the formal session.
I have one here.
Wonderful.
It's moved by Councillor Downer, seconded by Councillor Main, that the Committee of the Whole rise and report. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. With that, we have a motion by Councillor Gordon, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, that the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole for the meeting of January 20th, 2021 be adopted as resolutions of Council. Comments or questions from Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, that carries. We do not have any motions for which notices were given. I have therefore a motion moved by Councillor Downer, seconded by Councillor Gordon, the bylaw 2021-2 being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of the regular council meeting. Oh, it's just a sec now. Doesn't seem right. Here we are. I beg your pardon. It's amazing what you forget in the space of 3 or 4 weeks. Moved by Councillor Prost, seconded by Councillor Olszewski, that bylaw 2021-1 being a bylaw to enter into a transfer payment agreement with Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Transportation for the Province of Ontario for municipal transit enhanced cleaning be passed and enacted. Comments or questions from Council? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That again carries. The confirmatory bylaw moved by Councillor Downer, seconded by Councillor Gordon, the bylaw 2021-2 being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of the regular council meeting with closed session held January 20th, 2021 be passed and enacted. All those in favor? Thank you. Finally, moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, that this regular meeting of council with closed session be adjourned at 8:57. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
I just had one thing to add. How about those Buffalo Bills? Let's do it this weekend, boys. Sorry, I had to do it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Oh, here we go. We have a dissenting. We have a dissenting on that one. That this regular meeting of council with closed session adjourn at 8:57 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you, and Happy New Year to all of you. I hope it's a happy and healthy one, mostly.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.